Hello and welcome. This is India Global. I'm Gaurie, Dwivedi. Let's kickstart the show with headlines this Tuesday evening. First up, massive 7.1 magnitude earthquake strikes Tibet, Nepal and parts of China. 95 people have been killed so far. Over 100 have been injured in the earthquake that's taken place near Mount Everest. Bangladesh border guards allegedly attempt to derail BSF's critical border fencing process in West Bengal. Locals stand firm with BSF, ward off Bangladesh border guards. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau finally announces his resignation. Who will now take over? And more importantly, how will the new Canadian Prime Minister reset ties with India? Seattle police officer who killed Indian student Janvi Kandula 2 years back with the car has finally been fired. Action has come after 2 long years of Kandula's tragic and shocking death in 2023. Tech giant Microsoft all set to invest $3 billion in cloud and AI in India. Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella made the announcement of the largest India stake after meeting Prime Minister Modi. All right, let's now focus on our big story right now, which is the dramatic incident that has unfolded at the India-Bangladesh border where tensions flared as the border guards of Bangladesh personnel allegedly attempted to interfere with the critical border fencing process at Bakhrabad Village Post in West Bengal. Local Indian citizens alongside the border security force personnel in fact stood firm, resisting what they saw and thought was a blatant challenge to India's national security. What followed was a powerful display of nationalism, the crowd filled with patriotic fervor. There were chants of Vande Mataram and Bharat Mata Ki Jai, and that forced, or at least that's what the video showed, that forced the BJP to personnel to retreat. It's important to note that the video footage shared by West Bengal opposition leader Subhendu Adhikari, which we are going to play right now, was on his social media X account but has not been verified by NDTV. While the authenticity remains in question, the symbolism of this incident cannot be denied.
Bharat Mata Ki Jai! Bharat Mata Ki Jai! Bharat Mata Ki Jai! Vande Mataram! Vande Mataram! Vande Mataram! Jai Shri Ram! 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 Vande Mataram!
All right, as I said, we cannot verify the authenticity of the video. So let's get in my colleague Saurabh Gupta, who of course has his ear to the ground to really talk to us about what's this video all about. It's a very passionate video that's there, and what one sees is that the border guards on the Bangladesh side were trying to interfere with the fencing process. But talk to us about what followed and what really was the locals' reaction on that incident.
Well, border fencing is, of course, critical, especially in West Bengal, and given the fact that West Bengal shares the longest border with Bangladesh. So, obviously, this has been an ongoing project. But there were some objections from what we pick up from sources on the ground, is that there were objections by the BGB, the border guard Bangladesh, when this exercise was taking place. And, of course, this led to this kind of, some kind of altercation, is what Subhendu Adhikari, the leader of opposition, has said. But obviously, what we are being told by our sources in the BSF is that the exercise continues. There has been no interruption in the exercise, and they say, of course, there's no official statement from the BSF on this, but what we've heard is that this exercise will continue because given the situation in Bangladesh and given what we've seen in West Bengal, attempts to infiltrate from Bangladesh, also, all of that is something that, and the anti-India comments that have been coming out of there, all of this has led to a certain amount of vigil, extra vigil on the border, a high alert on the border. Remember, the BSF chief himself, the DG himself, had visited the border areas a few days ago, and That is something that the BSF will continue to do, is what BSF sources are telling us. Even if there is some sort of attempt to try and create a scenario at the border.
All right, Saurabh, we leave it there. Thanks much for breaking that down for us to put things into perspective as to what really happened on that border incident. All right, the bottom line as far as that incident is concerned is that the explosive clash that took place at the place that Bakhrabad Village, the true spirit of Indian nationalism was in fact on full display. And when Bangladesh's border guard attempted to disrupt the crucial border fencing process, they found themselves facing an unwavering force of Indian citizens and BSF personnel. United in their love for the nation, the people of Sukhdevpur, fueled by patriotism, rallied behind their soldiers, chanting those chants, and the message couldn't be clearer that no external interference will ever undermine India's sovereignty. Meanwhile, it looks like Bangladesh might be making a move to thaw its frayed ties with India. In a notable shift, two key Bangladesh diplomatic officers, Sikdar Mohammad Ashrafur Rahman and Arif Mohammad, are set to return to their posts in Kolkata and Agartala. This after being recalled to Dhaka in December. Now, their departure followed a wave of security incidents that took place. There were some attacks that took place on Bangladesh's diplomatic missions, heightened the tensions between India and Bangladesh. For weeks, these posts have been run by skeleton staff, and now sources indicate that things may look up from here. Both sides have repeatedly emphasized the importance of bilateral trust. There's been talk about how there needs to be movement forward. And of course, the contentious issue remains Sheikh Hasina's presence in India, but also treatment of Hindu minorities in Bangladesh. But beyond these two thorny issues, New Delhi and Dhaka have engaged in diplomatic dialogues. There's been effort to try and see how best to really address these issues and take the relationship forward. Some Indian diplomats question whether this is truly a thaw or merely a temporary calm. The return of these diplomats, who were closely linked with the previous Bangladeshi government, could signal that Bangladesh's interim regime is seeking to re-establish its influence, possibly paving the way for a new chapter in India-Bangladesh relations or setting the stage for deeper divisions. All right, let's get in. I guess joining me this evening, Dr. Ashrafur Rahman, who's an economist, Policy Research Institute of Bangladesh, and Ambassador Suresh Goyal, joining me from Delhi. Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you so much for speaking to me on an issue which I feel is important simply because, you know, we've spent a lot of airtime talking about how things are not looking up. But today we are talking about an issue which I think does indicate that maybe there are some opportunities to discuss about how things are looking up. And that's exactly what I want to ask you, Dr. Rahman, that while there are enough and more issues and fissures that exist between India and Bangladesh, do you think this movement, the fact that some diplomats are returning back to missions and High Commission in India is sending a message towards normalcy?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. As I have always said, I'm a strong believer in India-Bangladesh ties. We have multi-dimensional relationship. Our trade is over $16 billion. I don't see any rational foreign policy creating long-term antagonism with India. So I feel that if whatever happened in the initial few months, I think normalcy is returning, and it should return. We'll have our point of differences, we'll have our point of agreements, and that should be the way good friends treat with each other. So I'm not surprised. I did not feel, and we spoke I think in August, I never felt that whatever antagonism was happening is a lasting one. I do feel that there are issues where there might be serious disagreements on both sides, maybe rational, but I don't see a future where India and Bangladesh will not cooperate, given how integrated we are in geography, history, trade, and economy. So I do see that good days are ahead. I hope good days are ahead. And if we take rational foreign policy, then engagement, cooperation is the only way forward.
Let's take that to Ambassador Goyal as well, that there are some positive notes today that we are discussing. A lot of time has been spent on the growing acrimony between India and Bangladesh, but this looks like some positive movement. Ambassador Goyal, how do you read it?
One or two things. I think, first of all, what Dr. Rahman has said makes a lot of logic. It does carry a lot of force, really, in terms of the importance of bilateral engagement between India and Bangladesh. Let us face it, let us put it this way. India and Bangladesh are two important neighbors, and the neighboring countries will have to deal with each other. They may have their areas of disagreement. They may be friends. They may be very good friends. They may have differences, but they have to deal with each other. And what I would really describe the developments of diplomatic restatement, if I may put it this way, the two diplomatic officers returning to their post is a clear indication of recognition of that necessity by Bangladesh government. The missions and the posts are the mechanisms through which they deal with each other, and they will continue. As far as really the good days ahead is concerned, I think uh, enough has been said. There has been a lot of acrimony, and I think the foreign secretary's visit to Bangladesh has made some difference. The importance really is to recognize that India and Bangladesh will continue to be the most important relationship in the days to come, in the months and the years to come. And denying that importance will be to the detriment of both the countries. I do hope that this recognition will work in future. The important thing is that several negative elements which have come in, they need to be addressed, but that will take time. Gaurie.
Indeed, that will take time, and one can only hope where things go from here. But you know, when you talk about necessity, Dr. Rahman, then let me also talk about the fact that at some level, it's quite clear that Bangladesh also needs India. You know, when you make such positive movements, it's also because you want to go back to normalcy, because the economic ties between the two countries require that normalcy to happen. And you know, some of the GDP data that has come out indicates that when it comes to Bangladesh, it's seen a huge change in its economy, in its economic landscape in the last 1 year, especially in the last 6 months. And probably steps like these are the kind of roadmap you need towards going back to normalcy.
I agree with you. I mean, we have an interdependent relationship. We are importing roughly 16 to 18 billion dollars of goods and services from India. India is a big market for us in terms of we go there for healthcare. Bangladesh is a big market for India in terms of selling goods and services. So we have a strong mutual dependence in terms of security, in terms of economy. So as I said earlier, I don't see a rational foreign policy on both sides that creates irrational antagonism. There will always be point of differences. Bangladesh economy was hit by unrest in July, devastating floods in August. Our economy took a big hit. Inflation has been very high for the last 2 years.
Yes.
We need trade with India to keep supply chains
Indeed.
of vegetables, of imports, of food items. I think it's a very, very strong interdependent relationship. And I hope rationality prevails. As an economist, I can only hope.
Yeah, let me take that to Ambassador Goel as we wrap things up here, which is that, Ambassador Goel, in your assessment, the top 1 or 2 things that you would want to ensure that some of these good steps are not marred by acrimonious steps on the other side or bitter remarks on the other side. What would you want to follow up as the next steps after this important positive movement?
I think the first step that must be taken is to recreate or regenerate, if I may say so, that atmosphere of confidence and trust in each other, which has been completely marred since the overthrow of Sheikh Hasina. Several steps have been taken by Bangladesh, if I may name so, like in terms of cancelling the training of judicial officers in India, for whatever reason, even though India was completely funding it. Several things have happened really, and the environment of creating violence against minorities that has touched on the people of India. I think the first thing that can be taken is to address these issues, quieten them down. There is a small population which is encouraging these trends. So deal with them with a strong hand. Enter into a conversation again with a view to future. I think one of the most important things has been the connectivity. the bus services and trains
Yes.
between India and Bangladesh, which have been stopped, they should be restarted so that
Yes.
people can come and go again. Yes.
Absolutely. Those are some of the positive things. And I must, as I wrap this up, I must say that after a very long time, after weeks, I am ending a discussion on Bangladesh on a positive note of some optimism. And that gives me confidence that maybe there will be better days ahead as far as the relationship is concerned. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for taking out the time and speaking to me. And on that note, we slip into a very short break. We come back on the other side with the latest as far as the earthquake, 7.1 magnitude earthquake that struck Nepal and parts of Tibet. We come back with more details on the other side. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching India Global with me, Gaurie, Dwivedi. We turn our attention now to the massive 7.1 magnitude earthquake that has struck parts of Tibet, Nepal and China. 95 people have been killed so far and 100 have been injured in the earthquake near Mount Everest. Right now, of course, there are all rescue operations that are currently underway, and remains to be seen as to what happens next. Visuals on your screen are telling of what really has happened there in the region, and all eyes now on who all can be pulled out in the rescue efforts that are currently underway. All right, let's get in a voice from CGTN to give us a sense of how things are unfolding right now. You are in Lhasa. Talk to us about the kind of rescue efforts that are currently underway. What are authorities telling you about the next 24 to 48 hours?
Well, the national emergency response level has been raised to level 2 in response to the earthquake today. And according to officials, we have good news that the 19 injured people have been sent to the 2 hospitals in Shiga, the city. The officials of the 2 hospitals have also prepared 96 beds in case of more injuries sent. And the epicenter this time is in Tuoguo township. That's one of the townships in Gaurie County in Shiga city. And around the epicenter, there are 27 more villages with a population of 6,900. And also the rescue missions are still underway. The power supply was restored this afternoon. And also, the China's Ministry of Emergency Management has dispatched a task force to the affected area to guide the relief efforts. And the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Emergency Management have urgently allocated 100 million yuan. That's about over $10 million to support the rescue missions, search and relocation efforts, as well as the secondary disaster prevention. And also the Western China Hospital in southwestern China's Sichuan province, which is also one of the top hospitals, sent 6 experts who have expertise in trauma medicine, intensive care medicine, as well as neuroscience to the affected area to help the treatment. And the China's Red Cross Society has also sent over 4,600 relief items, including cotton tents, quilts, warm jackets to help the rescue operations, because the altitude of the epicenter is about 4,200 meters above sea level. And now it's winter, so it's freezing cold in the evening. So warm jackets and cotton tents are extremely needed. And the PLA has also dispatched the troops, the first group of more than 750 soldiers and 2 helicopters, as well as 20 rescue vehicles were deployed to the affected area this afternoon. And 2,200 more soldiers are on standby to help. And rescue missions will still go on for a few days.
All right, Mr. Zheng, thanks much for speaking to us and giving us a lowdown of how things are looking as far as Lhasa is concerned, where this has undertaken. All right, shifting focus now to the other big story that we are tracking. Microsoft Chairman and CEO Satya Nadella on stage at the Microsoft AI Tour in Bengaluru, where he announced $3 billion of investment in India for cloud and AI infra over the next 2 years. Microsoft shared a comprehensive plan to train and skill 10 million people by 2030, reinforcing its commitment to partnering with India on its journey to become an AI-first country. Microsoft Research Lab launched an AI Innovation Network, a groundbreaking initiative designed to accelerate the transition from research to real usable business solutions. Microsoft and SAS Bhumi have joined hands to propel India's AI and SaaS ecosystem towards a $1 trillion economy, aiming to impact over Indian startups and entrepreneurs. Listen in to what Satya Nadella had to say.
I'm very excited to announce today that our commitment, which we have always had, now is to train 10 million people in India around AI skills by 2030. And to me, the thing that is always most important is to not think of the skilling in the abstract, but to see the skills translated into impact right here, one community at a time, one industry at a time.
All right, turning our attention to the latest that's unfolding in Myanmar, where after the rebels captured key towns in Myanmar, the Arakan army has said that it is ready for political talks with the military junta and its chief, which might involve China as a broker. Potential talks were introduced after the Arakan army captured the west coast town of Gaurie at the southernmost tip of the Rakhine state, a major hit to Myanmar's junta regime. The Arakan army also extended an olive branch to Beijing, praising China for its active leadership in promoting stability through negotiations with the Ethnic Armed Organizations, or the EAO, saying it was willing to hold political talks at any time. Remember, this is exactly why China's role is so much in talks. And most importantly, which way does this go from here impacts the entire region. It impacts Myanmar, it impacts Bangladesh, it impacts Thailand, it impacts India. Of course, it impacts China, which is why it is doing what it is. And in fact, the bottom line to this is that China's ruthless carrot and stick strategy in Myanmar is a clear ploy to tighten its grip on the region. While Beijing dangles promises of economic growth through the China-Myanmar economic corridor, it simultaneously is cozying up to Myanmar's brutal military junta, offering political support for a regime that's notorious for its human rights abuses. By positioning itself as a broker for talks, China seeks to manipulate both sides, securing its economic interests at the cost of Myanmar's sovereignty and stability. This isn't diplomacy, it's a calculated effort to further entrench the dragon's influence in Southeast Asia, one puppet regime at a time. All right, on that note, we slip into a very short break. We come back on the other side with lots more stories, including the latest that's unfolding in Canadian politics. Stay with us. You're watching India Global. We now turn our attention to Canada, where the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced his intention to resign, and that could pave the way for a diplomatic reset with India. After facing loss of support from key allies within his party and declining approval ratings, Trudeau announced that he will resign as party leader and Prime Minister, but he will stay on as the Prime Minister until the Liberal Party chooses a new leader last night. From New Delhi's perspective, Trudeau's time was up, with opinion polls showing he would have possibly lost the elections after being in office for 10 years. He became the Liberal Party's leader in 2013, Prime Minister in 2015, and while Trudeau's legacy will go down as the Prime Minister who destroyed the India-Canada ties, it appears a leadership race is underway within the Liberal Party. Before we dig into how a new regime at Ottawa will impact ties with New Delhi, take a look at this report that tells you who's in the running to be the next Prime Minister of Canada.
I intend to resign as party leader, as Prime Minister, after the party selects its next leader through a robust, nationwide, competitive process.
As the outgoing Canadian Prime Minister made the biggest announcement of his career, pages from his speech blew away. Emblematic of the political blows he's faced in the recent month. Canadian politics has now stepped out of the Trudeau era, with the PM's big decision to step down hardly coming as a surprise.
Why didn't you do it earlier?
Trudeau's departure from the role comes at a particularly sensitive time as far as the India-Canada ties are concerned. The relationship has hit a historic low after Trudeau accused New Delhi of being involved in the killing of terrorist Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Ottawa has not furnished any concrete proof in the case, prompting India to repeatedly refute its claims. Foreign policy experts are saying Trudeau's resignation may provide an opportunity to stabilize a free-falling India-Canada relationship, as India has directly blamed Trudeau for the deep tension. So who's next in line to be at the helm of affairs in Canada? The Parliament will pause until March to allow the party to find a new leader, and several big names are in the mix. Former Bank of England and Bank of Canada Governor Mark Carney has already thrown his hat in the ring. He seems to have favourable views of India, as he has said that New Delhi is central to global climate action. There is Chrystia Freeland, who recently resigned as the finance minister. She's been quoted as saying that Canada's foreign policy supports a strong and united India. Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly, who's walked in lockstep with Trudeau, is one of the top contenders for the post. If she climbs to the top, it would be interesting to see whether her views change. India Origin Transport Minister Anita Anand is also likely to put up a good fight. On the other hand is the Conservative Party led by Pierre Poilievre. It's been topping the popularity charts for a while now, opening a 24-point lead over the Liberals in the lead-up to a federal election. It's made Poilievre one of the strongest contenders for the Prime Minister's post. Poilievre has been quite vocal in his criticism of Trudeau's handling of the Canada-India dispute. He said if he were to become the Prime Minister, he would seek to restore a professional relationship with the Indian government, acknowledging India's importance as the largest democracy on earth. Canada is the only Western state that's seen worsening ties with India in recent years, something the incoming leader would like to change. With Vishal Vivek, Bureau Report, NDTV World.
All right, let's now turn our attention to the big questions that we are posing on this debate. First question, will immigration and visa curbs be lifted now that Justin Trudeau is out? The next question that we are asking, and we're going to put that to our guests as well, that which of Trudeau's successors is likely to be most beneficial to India? We pointed out about half a dozen of those who are in the fray, but who's likely to be best from India's point of view? The third key question that we are asking is that is it now time, or will one see that instead of a very conflict-oriented approach in the case of Nijjar's investigation and probe, it will now to be cooperation that will actually now take place? And let's get in Terry Melisqui, who's joining us from Ottawa, and we have Brahmachalani, strategic affairs expert, joining us from Delhi. Terry, let me start by asking you the first question, which is that some of those who are in the fray, we've pointed out, we've told our viewers who are those going to be. Talk to us about, from an India-Canada relationship point of view, which of these contenders could actually be best positioned to repair the damage that's been done to the relationship under Justin Trudeau's tenure?
The best chance of improving the relationship between India and Canada rests in the hands not of any of the contenders for the Liberal Party leadership, but in the hands of the Conservative leader, Pierre Poilievre, who fought quite rightly as by far the leading contender to be the next Prime Minister. So it's unkind, but I'm going to say it, that it's probably irrelevant who wins the Liberal Party leadership in terms of improving relations with any other country, and especially the particularly difficult relations that we have now between Canada and India. Having said that, I don't think there's a significant difference between the candidates on the issue of India, Khalistan, the Nijjar assassination, and so forth, because it's a huge issue, of course, for India. But for the voters of Canada, it's an also-ran issue. It's at the bottom of the list. Restoring relations with India is not the most important thing on the voters' minds going into the next election in Canada. And they are, as I say, most likely not to pick any Liberal to lead the country. And that does suggest, finally, that yes, there may indeed be some improvement in relations, because how do they get worse? It can only get better, really, under a Conservative Prime Minister, although I don't personally believe that a Conservative Prime Minister will act very differently. Cosmetically, yeah, there'll be nicer work. There'll be less tension between the two Prime Ministers,
Okay.
Narendra Modi and whoever it is. But I don't think substantively they'll act differently with respect to the conduct of the Niger investigation.
Okay. So, of course, it may not be an election issue. All electorates vote on basic bread and butter issues, and Canadians are no different, especially when they are facing record high levels of food inflation and record high levels of unemployment and housing costs and so on and so forth. So it may not be an election issue, but this is also about, repairing some of the damage. Bilateral relations are important. India has actually improved its relationship with all G7 countries, all developed countries, barring Canada. And Brahma Chilani, let me ask you this, that how do you see that now relationship undergoing a positive change now that Trudeau is set to demit office? Or do you think so?
Positive change will take a while. First, whoever succeeds Trudeau as the Liberal Party leader is not going to fundamentally change course on India. But there is a more fundamental issue which we tend to gloss over, which is that for several decades now, as the Kanishka bombing underscored, that Canada has become the global epicenter of Khalistan militancy. That problem predated the arrival of Justin Trudeau as Prime Minister. His exit will not make material difference to that issue. It is true that Justin Trudeau sought to pander to Khalistan militants, especially because he was reliant on the support of Jagmeet Singh, who leads a smaller party in the Canadian Parliament. But the fact is that the course of the relationship between Canada and India also depends a lot on India, because after the Air India bombing occurred, India exerted no pressure on Canada to bring to justice the perpetrators of that bombing. Successive governments in India exerted no pressure on Canada. As a result, Canada became the global hub of Khalistan militancy. Today, if there's a change of government, especially if the Conservatives take over the reins of government, and India exerts no pressure on Canada to come clean, to stop providing shelter and refuge to Khalistan militants who are openly using Canadian soil to make terrorist threats against India. If India exerts no pressure, then this problem will continue. We will only kick the ball down the road.
Let's take that to Terry, which is a very important point of Canada-India relationship, which is the anti-India rhetoric. It's grown. There have been very personal, rabid remarks, and one gets the sense that it's actually a sanctuary when it comes to harboring anti-India elements. And how do we address that issue? Because that's really the core of the issue, isn't it, Terry?
Yes, there's no question that there is a real problem with the Canadian attitude and their lack of urgency in dealing with the threat, and their lack of ability at the outset to even appreciate that there was a threat. I mean, when Gaurie asked Trudeau, Justin's father, for the extradition of the man who soon later became the mastermind of the Air India, the Kanishka bomb plot, Trudeau Sr. said no, didn't want to interfere, didn't want to get involved, didn't want to pick sides, wanted to have his hands off. That attitude prevailed in the years that followed. The investigation of the bombing, of course, was completely botched. trial was a fiasco, and only one man ever went to prison for this. Now, having said all of that, there is the present problem. What you're referring to is the way that Palestinians seem to be free in Canada, say whatever they like, no holds barred. The freedom of speech has been extended in Canada, not just to allow people to go down the street waving a flag and saying Palestine Zindabad, which is freedom of speech, nobody's hurt, that's okay. But to go beyond that and glorify terrorists, like putting the Baisakhi parade floats with great big posters of Dalvinda Parmar, the Air India bomber, celebrating his glorious career as though he's some sort of hero, that is inciting hatred, that is encouraging terrorism. That should be against the law, and it isn't. And I don't think India has done a particularly effective job lobbying Canada to explain the difference between inciting terrorism, inciting hatred, and regular freedom of speech, which threatens nobody. And the Indians need to, I think, fine-tune their approach. Okay, look, there's some things we will tolerate, but we're not going to tolerate a truck going through a city in Ontario. It happened last year with a life-size diorama celebrating the assassination of Indira Gandhi in 1984. I mean, it's absolutely outrageous. For the country which you don't see people in New York parading Osama bin Laden through New York. I mean,
exactly.
Come on. So the Canadians have a responsibility to address that issue, and they've ducked it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, this brings me to the other question I want to ask both the panelists. Let me start with you, Mr. Chilani, which is the Seik vote. And, you know, while there is a 2% Sikh population, it is the Khalistanis who seem to dominate their entire discourse. With an election round the corner, all parties will woo the Sikh vote once again. How do you see that likely to impact the overall relationship between India and Canada, given that harboring Khalistanis is pretty much at the core of that relationship?
It's a good question. First, Canada is home to the world's largest Sikh diaspora. Unfortunately, the Khalistan elements among the Sikh diaspora have organized themselves in such a way that they are using Canada's political system in a very effective manner, because the Canadian political system is not based on holding of primaries. Candidates are chosen by parties, not through primaries, but through meetings that are held in, let's say, a convention center in a district where maybe 200, 300 people might attend, and those who organize themselves very well are able to get their candidate nominated as the party's candidate.
Okay.
And the Khalistanis have understood how to exploit the system in Canada, and they have had undue influence in Canadian politics because of their organizational skills.
Indeed. And quickly, Terry, let me ask you the same question, which is about wooing the Sikh vote. All parties will go all out on that.
Yes, and I think that there's another, again, I'm sorry to harp on India's mistakes instead of Canada's, but India's tended to overlook the fact that the other party, it's not just the Liberals, it's not just Trudeau, the other parties in Canada, also succumb to this temptation. Well, you know, they're promising to give me 2,000 votes in the local Gurdwara if I sing their song and I don't make any fuss about the glorification of terrorism, for example. So I think, yeah, I'd rather have the vote. I think I'll just keep my mouth shut when these parades go by at Vaisakhi time. So I do think that all parties have been guilty of pandering to this voting bloc, but let's not exaggerate it. That's the mistake that Canadian politicians make. They think that it's decisive. They think it all depends on the Khalistani vote, notwithstanding that, in fact, they need to wake up and realize that it's a minority.
Yes. They are a minority, but an important minority, because it's a vote that votes in mass. Thank you so much, gentlemen, Terry Miliski as well as Pramod Chilani for joining me on this discussion. And on that note, we slip into a very short break. We come back on the other side with the police officer who killed Indian student has finally been sacked after 2 long years. We come back and address that story and lots more. Stay with us. Welcome back, viewers. On India Global, we now address a very heart-wrenching story. It's taken 2 long years for Indian student Janvi Khandula's death to finally be addressed. Remember, she was killed by a police vehicle that was driven by a Seattle police officer when she was crossing a street 2 years back on 23rd of January 2023. The police officer responsible for her death, Kevin Dave, has finally been sacked from the police department. One would wonder, why has it taken 24 long months for actual justice to be delivered? Khandula was thrown 100 feet when she was struck by the speeding police patrol vehicle, and she, 23 years of age, she was from Andhra Pradesh. She was pursuing a master's degree from the Northeastern University and was due to graduate just the same year, December 2023. Now, what has happened is that in the last 2 years, the developments that have unfolded is that the second police officer, which was Daniel Orderer, was fired following his insensitive comments and laughter. He actually laughed when that poor girl lost her life because of a speeding vehicle. He was sacked, and now the driver of that vehicle has finally been sacked. Every time one talks about racism, remember the story of this young girl, Janvi Khandula, in United States. When you talk about racism, how she and her parents and her family took 2 long years to finally get justice over probably one of the most insensitive cases to have come to light in recent times. All right, turning our attention now to the latest in terms of a very important economic development that's unfolding, where Malaysia and Singapore leaders have signed an agreement on Tuesday to create a special economic zone to attract global investments and ease the cross-border flow of goods and services and people, actually. A lot of people stay in Malaysia, go to Singapore to work, and do that every single day back and forth. Now, the zone that is set to be created is going to be in Malaysia's southernmost Johor state, and is expected to cover about 3,500 square kilometers, which could be more than 4 times the size of Singapore. There will be tax breaks, and there will be, of course, several flagship areas and projects that will be there. And there will be manufacturing focus, aerospace, tourism, energy, healthcare. All of that will get a major impetus due to this project. Officials are targeting to attract about 50 projects within the economic zone in the first 5 years and hope to create 20,000 skilled jobs. It could be a huge boon for Singapore as well. It's a global financial hub, but it has scarce natural resources and land and even people as well. So it could be a huge win-win for both Malaysia and Singapore. And the bottom line to that really is that as Malaysia and Singapore prepare to finalize their ambitious special economic zone, they're sending a clear message to China. The future of Southeast Asia will not be dictated by Beijing's economic dominance. Spanning over 3,500 square kilometers, the massive zone could rival China's Shenzhen, an economic titan in its own right. And this proves that collaboration between neighbors could actually ensure that China's coercive influence can be countered. So if this SEZ works, it could hurt China to the tune of 4 trillion yuan in the face of Chinese expansion. Southeast Asia is choosing unity, sovereignty, and self-reliance. Turning attention now to latest news coming in from France, where Jean-Marie Le Pen, the founder of France's far-right National Front, who was known for his fiery rhetoric against immigration and multiculturalism that earned him both staunch supporters and widespread condemnation, has died at the age of 96. A polarizing figure in French politics, Le Pen's controversial statements, including Holocaust denial and his 1987 proposal to forcibly isolate people with AIDS in special facilities, led to multiple convictions and strained his political alliances. Le Pen, who once reached the second round of the 2002 presidential election, was eventually estranged from his daughter, Marine Le Pen, who renamed his National Front party, kicked him out and transformed it into one of France's most powerful political forces, and distanced herself from her father's extremist image. More news coming in from this time from West Asia, where in a major blow to Tehran's influence in West Asia, Iranian forces have largely withdrawn forces from Syria following the fall of President Assad last month. Many of the Iranian and proxy fighters fled across the border to Iraq, while others headed to Iran or Lebanon. The withdrawal signals the collapse of Iran's years-long strategy of using Syria as a key hub to project power across West Asia, including its proxy wars against the United States and Israel. And for over a decade, Iran poured billions of dollars, deployed thousands of soldiers and militia fighters to prop up Assad's regime, and now it has all come crashing down. Syria was a key part of Tehran's broader strategy to establish a land bridge connecting Iran to Hezbollah in Lebanon. Hezbollah, remember, is Iran's proxy in the region. However, with Assad's collapse and Israel's ongoing military campaign against Tehran's proxies, including Hezbollah, the situation has rapidly deteriorated for Tehran and its political leaders. North Korea has launched its first ballistic missile of the year into the East Sea, also known as the Sea of Japan. North Korea claims the missile is a new hypersonic intermediate-range weapon designed to target distant areas in the Pacific. Kim Jong-un has also vowed to continue expanding his nuclear-capable arsenal in order to counter what he calls rival countries. The launch comes just 2 weeks ahead of U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's inauguration, following a year of intense missile tests by North Korea. And finally, a reporter who ended online speculation that Tesla and ex-CEO Elon Musk was posing as an ardent fan has reportedly been temporarily banned from the social media site, and links to her stories have been restricted. In one of the latest dramas surrounding Musk, suspicions arose that a poster on X named Adrian Dittman, who sounds like Musk and regularly defends him, might have been the South African-born billionaire himself, using a so-called sock puppet account. However, Jacqueline Sweet, a reporter at The Spectator, determined that Dittman is actually a real person living in Fiji. Never a dull moment when it comes to Elon Musk. All right, on that note, completely out of time in this edition of India Global. Thank you so much, viewers, for watching this edition.